Welcome to a new episode of DevSecOps Talks with me, Matthias.
Paulina, and our special guest.
Hey, my name's Steve. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Steve. Good to have you here. It's actually this. You, me, met Steve in Stockholm last year, right? In December.
Yeah, I think it was December. That seems like a long time ago now, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, that was a long time. It was cold and snow. No, it wasn't any snow, right? It come after, right? You only
No, it was. Yeah, no snow, cold and rainy, a bit like England.
Yeah, it was. That period was miserable here. Now it was a little bit better. We got some snow, and now we're getting sun again. But I did see, Steve, you post a lot of things on LinkedIn, and I was thinking like this is interesting topic for us to dive more into. But first, maybe you want to share some notes what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Wade. I'm the founder of Platform Fix, and companies call me when their Kubernetes migrations 18 months in, millions over budget, and their best engineers are leaving. And then I come in and delete things strategically, right? And I've done this 53 times before, not that I'm counting or anything. And I've removed about 100 million in complexity wastes. And why do I care about this so much? Well, I care about this so much because this used to be me. Like I used to be this problem. I led a migration many, many years ago. It was supposed to take 6 months. 18 months later, 70 microservices, 3 service meshes. Yep, 3. We kept starting new ones and never finished the old ones. And we had monitoring tools that needed their own monitoring. Yeah. And 2 senior engineers quit, right? And then the VP of engineering gave me 90 days or the team was getting replaced. Yeah. Right. And those 90 days really changed everything for me. We deleted about 50 of the 70 services. We ripped out all the service meshes, and the deployment time went from 3 weeks of mayhem to 3 days consistently, right? And then 6 months later, one of the engineers I managed to convince to come back. And that's really what Platform Fix is about. While everyone's collecting cloud native tools like Pokemon cards, I'm trying to help teams figure out which ones to throw away and which ones to keep.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to discuss today. Like, how do you find the tools? Where to go for? How can you make your platform like more, should you say stable, like more usable, right?
Yeah, I think, we live in a world where if you just look at the cloud native landscape, you have to zoom out on your browser to be able to see all the tools, right? And as someone that's new to Kubernetes or even not new, someone that's intermediate or advanced, right? They have to make a number of choices that they have to stand behind. And sometimes those are the right choices. And then sometimes those turn out in 3 or 6 or 8 or 12 months to be the wrong choices. So really what I do is I help them figure out what does their platform need to look like and what are the best tools for them to leverage where they are right now and where they're looking to go in the future.
Yeah.
I think we see, the same thing right now starting to happening with AI tools as well, and also AI coming to the platform. Do you see similar, at least what I see, that what we have with cloud native, now we have additional layer of the, tool fatigue also with AI tools or AI native or AI in the platform?
Of course, absolutely right. And you've got a number of these large language models that you have at your disposal, right? So the first thing is which tool do you use? Then the second thing is how do you even write good prompts to get it to do the things that you want to get it to do? And then kind of tertiary to that, or thirdly to that, is who's the one that's responsible when the AI written code doesn't work in the way that it's supposed to work? Because you can't point a finger at someone because you're pointing a finger at someone that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So there's that angle as well, right? And I think there's a lot of governance that needs to happen around AI and the usage of AI.
There'll be a lot of new tools coming up because now everybody can build their own monitoring tool for their special needs, right? So you can build more like custom feature that just for your environment, and then in that sense you also bring the tool box to a larger number.
Yeah, and I think that's where the complexity trap comes, right? I've walked into companies where the platform team's spending 65 or 70% of their time explaining their own platform to the people using it, right? And that's not a team. That's a help desk with infrastructure access.
Yeah.
Right. And people inside that people inside the complexity, they just can't see it. They kind of normalize it, right? So I try and give non-technical leaders 3 things to watch, and we can go through those.
Yeah, please, because that's one of the questions I have. Like, it's easy for people, developer and maybe ops people, to see like it's a mess, right? But if you're not technical, if you're just like a VP or your project manager, how would you know that the platform is bloated, right?
Yeah, so I think I call them non-technical, which I find actually a little bit disrespectful. I think I need a better term than that. But people that are not hands-on keyboard coding and implementing, let's call them that. So I give them 3 things to watch out for. Number 1 is what I call the hiring treadmill. So is your head count growing, but is your shipping speed flat, right? And all that capacity is basically absorbed in maintenance.
Yeah.
Right, that's the first one.
Yeah.
The second one is what I call the onboarding test. So I ask the newest developer, how long from the day that you joined to your first production deployment?
Yeah.
If it's more than a week, it's a swamp, right?
Yeah.
And my benchmark is, can a 2-week-old developer, like not in birth in the time that they've been there, let me just get that correct, deploy without asking anyone? And if the answer is yes, it means you have a platform. And if it's no, it means you have platform theater.
Yeah.
And then finally, the third one is what I call the acronym test. So I ask the platform team to explain any tool of their choosing without using a single acronym. And if they can't, then it's kind of resume-driven architecture, right? And I'll give you an example of this story.
Yeah.
So I was working at a 200-person fintech, right? Brilliant people, and they'd hired this really senior engineer. For this conversation, let's call him Mark. So he had a big tech background, super impressive GitHub. You know, the first month he proposed the full stack. We're going to run Kubernetes, we're going to run Istio, we're going to run Argo, we're going to run Crossplane, we're going to run Backstage, we're going to run Vault, we're going to run Prometheus, Loki, Tempo, you know, and it just keeps going. And the CTO thought, well, you know, Spotify uses it, it must be the best practice, right? So he just approved it. And then 18 months later, 2.3 million, 6 engineers just keeping it running, and the developers are waiting weeks to deploy. And then Mark left, right? And he had led Kubernetes migration on his CV. And then when I asked what was Istio actually solving, nobody could answer. And it was costing the company about $250,000 to be able to run Istio for a problem that could have been fixed just by network policies for what they wanted it to be used for.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the thing that I see constantly. I asked 3 people in the same company last month how many Kubernetes clusters they needed. So it's the same company in the same project. And it was 3 completely different answers. That's not a technical disagreement, right? That's a sign that nobody's aligned on what the platform is actually for and what it needs to be used for.
So who is the platform for then, right? Like,
So,
I mean, that's I spoke with other people as well. Like, sometimes it feels like you build a platform, and the ones that are building the platform is building a platform for themselves, right? But who is the platform for?
So the platform's customers are the developers that are deploying the workloads to it, right? Yeah. The platform is useless if it doesn't have any applications running on it. So exactly. I use these phrases. I call it vanilla Kubernetes. I then call it platform Kubernetes, and then I call it the platform, right? So you have just vanilla Kubernetes out the box. Then you have what I call platform Kubernetes, which is what are the workloads that need to run for the platform to function. So secret management, observability, maybe or maybe not a service mesh, right? Questionable. And then finally, the platform is once we have applications being deployed to them, then we have a real platform. So you can do platform resume theater all you want and build out this fantastic platform. Are you guys familiar with Sagrada Familia? The big cathedral
the big
in Barcelona. Yeah. So I use this analogy quite a lot. I say that so many platforms are like the Sagrada Familia. Yeah. So they look super, super impressive. Yeah. Right. And it's really intricate. But actually it's not finished yet.
It's just
but it's like every platform, right? It needs to look super impressive, but it can never be finished yet.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to get an MVP platform out? What tools do we need to have in that? And then how do we derive and build and bring business value to our consumers, right? Because if we're not building any business value, we're just messing around.
Exactly. So this is interesting. So, I mean, that's one of the things. maybe sometimes we see people that build a platform, but they're not building it for the application or for the business. They're building it for themselves, more or less, and then you get the swamp, right? You get the tools that like easier. Like why would you add that, right?
Yeah, another thing I think, sometimes what I've seen, I work as a consultant very often, that, even tech people oversee some stuff because they don't have fresh point of view. So you have 5 tools which does the same. And when you ask them, why do you have it? It was always here. So,
and there's
there's
also
missing the judgment and like they agree with what is already there. I think so. It's a mix.
yeah, I agree. And there's also recency bias, right? Which is people go to these conferences, they see the next greatest tool, and because it looks great on stage means they just have to use it. Right? It can do mutual TLS, and it can do rate limiting, and it can do canary deploys. Can your application handle canary deploys? No, but it's still cool and it's the latest and greatest thing. So we need to be running it. And I think there's that problem, but we can take it one level down, right? We can take that from Kubernetes itself, right? So I've helped with the Flux project, I've contributed to CNCF projects, and I love Kubernetes, right? But when it's earned. So I was working with a startup many, many years ago. They had 3 microservices, 10 users, 5 engineers, right? And they decided that they needed to use Kubernetes. Why?
Yeah.
Because Google uses it, and the CTO went to KubeCon, and it's the industry standard, right? So 6 months later, they've built infrastructure that could handle 10 million users, and they literally had about 97, right? But so I talk to customers about this, right? Google needs Kubernetes. Yeah. But your Series B startup needs to ship features.
Yeah.
Right. So,
but don't you see sometimes I see like that if you build a small Kubernetes cluster, it can still provide the benefits for you as a small company if you have the knowledge, right? I usually start now when I set up my stuff now. I usually go for the Kubernetes because I have a cluster, and so it's easy for me to deploy stuff. I have all the tooling ready, like logs, metrics, whatever, load balancer. Right?
But I think, it also depends. Are you going to maintain it? Are you leaving customer, for example, with it? Because, what skill set do they have? Because, okay, sure, I can, for example, deploy the cluster and I manage to maintain it afterwards. But if I'm just coming and doing the project and internal people or someone else supposed to maintain it, for example, it's going to be usually much easier for them to manage Docker versus ECS or something similar, whatever cloud you are using versus Kubernetes, because Kubernetes, this entry skill set is usually much higher even to manage Kubernetes than to, for example, Docker.
Yeah, agreed. Like what I recommend is boring, right? I live by this quote of boring is beautiful, especially when you call me at 3 a.m. Right. And it's really managed platform, managed databases, CI/CD that just works. Deploy on push and go home at 5 p.m. Right. Yeah. And like companies, I remember this company really, really well. Right. It spent 18 months building this custom deployment system. Right. Well-known CNCF tools. I'm not going to name which ones they are. You can figure out who they are. Right. Just to give you an idea of this project, it cost them $850,000 in engineering time. Right. And the result was about like 80 to 90% as good as GitHub Actions. So we migrated them off of this custom project to GitHub Actions. The cost was around 30,000 and the ongoing maintenance was 0. Right. So I was literally on site 2 weeks ago, right, with a company migrating their core products to Kubernetes, right? And we were starting an initial kickoff, right? And day 2, I run the unit economics. So I said, your architecture needs 4 times the amount of CPU and 2 times the amount of RAM for identical features. And they were about to deploy something their customers wouldn't pay for anymore, right? Yeah. So like one spreadsheet saved them from a migration that would have just simply destroyed the business model. And that's the question that nobody asks before a Kubernetes migration. Like, does the maths actually work?
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, it's one set, like, but also like the standardization here, like Kubernetes is the standard tool. Most people use it and can work with it today. But if you're starting new, like you're saying, like go to managed service first, right? Because then you don't have to worry about it, and they also standardize. Because the other part is like when you start building your Docker and Docker Compose, like it's not really a standard way for deploying and running, and then you have to build your own stuff, right? When you have the Kubernetes cluster, there are so many tools to shove your stuff in there, and then it keeps running.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's also, like, we shouldn't get caught up with the fact that there is maintenance of managed services as well, right? It's not completely zero maintenance, but it's orders of magnitude less than if you're running this stuff yourself.
And it's also much easier versus Kubernetes. So, and also part of the responsibility it's taken by the cloud provider usually, versus you have much more responsibility if you're running it on the Kubernetes, or more layers you take part of on your plate.
Yeah, I agree.
So one of the other parts is like you say that you delete a lot of stuff, right?
Yes.
How do you know where to delete that? Where would you start? Like,
so there's three frameworks that I use, right? It's the simplicity test, it's the 4 buckets, and it's the new tool tax. So let me kind of set the scene, right? So my greatest ever project was that I deleted 35 tools from a single company's platform, right? And they were paying about 85,000 a month for stuff that nobody needed, right? But the problem is that no one had the permission to question it, right? And that's the pattern. Everybody's trained to add new tools, new hires, new processes. Nobody asks, what if we remove something instead, right? And it's a 3-step process. So the first one is you measure, right? So I built a diagnostic tool called the simplicity test. You score the platform complexity across 10 dimensions, 0 to 50, right? They're tool sprawl, deployment complexity, cognitive load, operational burden, documentation debt, knowledge silos, incident frequency, time to production, self-service capability, and team satisfaction.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Right. Once you have those, if you're 0 to 15, it's sustainable. If you're 16 to 25, it's manageable. If it's 26 to 35, it's a warning. And then if it's 36 to 50, you're basically in crisis, right? And over 400 engineers have taken it, right? And the average score is around about 34, right? Most companies that call me are 38 to 45.
Yeah.
So once we've done the measurement, we can then start to categorize.
Yeah.
So every tool falls into what I call 4 buckets. Essential, we have to keep it. Redundant, it duplicates something and we could probably delete that immediately. Over-engineered, it's a real problem, but it's too complicated and we need to simplify it. Or just premature. So it's future scale that we don't have, right? Which means right now we can delete it. So of these 47 tools that I'm talking to you about, after the categorization, we had 12 that were essential, 19 redundant, 11 over-engineered, 5 premature. So 35 were deletable. So now you're asking, how do we delete them? So we have to delete in order, right? So we have to do, it's an impact versus risk. So we have to do high impact, low risk first, obviously.
But what kind of tools are we talking about here? Like, what is like? Can you give us a name from one of the CNFC like shorts? Like, what is the tool that?
So a customer, for example, had. This is a large customer, by the way, so you can understand why this kind of thing happens. They had Datadog, Prometheus, and New Relic.
Okay. Yeah.
So no one could explain these monitoring solutions. So we just deleted New Relic. Right. 30 grand saved immediately. 3 hours, no one noticed. Right. Then they had 17 databases. 9, no one knew that they were even there or what they were for. 0 connections in 30 days. Right. Sent an email. We're deprecating these databases in 2 weeks. If we don't hear anything back, we're deleting them. Guess what? 0 responses, deleted, nobody noticed. And then here's the security angle, right? For one of those unused tools and abandoned databases was an unpatched attack surface sitting in production with no one monitoring it, right? Deletion just isn't about simplification. It's about security hygiene as well, right?
Yeah,
And
I couldn't agree more. We had something, or like lack of ownership also sometimes provides something similar. I had a case when we had Flyway, which was outdated for 7 or 8 years, the versions, because one team thought another team is maintaining it, the other team thought that the other team is maintaining it, and it was kind of in the gray zone. But it was, for example, needed.
Yeah, and I write about patterns like this every Saturday in the Deletion Digest, right, which is a weekly newsletter for platform leaders or CTOs, right? And those 9 databases, they weren't just waste, they were a massive risk hiding in plain sight that no one's looking for.
So what would you see, like, when you look at a platform, like, I think you have some tool that you're kind of looking for first one to see, like, oh, they have this tool, I should just delete this one. Which one is it?
Yeah, so so let me explain to you how I do it, and then I'll give you the one that I recommend, or the one that normally comes up the most. So everyone talks about sunk cost, right? We spent 6 months building thing. So I call this the new tool tax. So when you add a new tool, right, open source or not open source, you don't just pay a license fee. Like, you pay a tax on the tool that you choose, and it's usually 3 to 5 times what the cost of the tool is. If it's free, it's not 3 or 4 or 5 times the cost of free, obviously. But the Vault license is quite expensive, right? Let's just take 40K as an example, right? That's the budget. But what they actually paid was this. So they have a learning tax, right? About 45K. 3 engineers, 2 weeks each, training, documentation, mistakes. So that's number 1. Number 2, integration tax. So that was about 20K. CI/CD implementations, Kubernetes operators, secret migration, monitoring of Vault itself. So we've got learning tax and we've got integration tax. The next one is operational tax. So 50K annually, on-call, upgrades, tickets, patching of systems. Then the final one, which no one really thinks about, is what I call opportunity tax. So opportunity tax was about 80K. So while the engineers are working on Vault, they're not building the things that could save them 200 hours a month, right? So the yearly cost for 1 year is actually 243,000, but you budgeted 40,000. So that's a 6x multiplier just from one tool, right? And what people don't do is they don't show that to the CTO, right? Because they said we invested 40K, and then you go and tell them that it's 243K, right? And it becomes, we can't keep investing on these things. So you asked me what the tool was. The tool is a service mesh. I'm not going to name which ones because it's dependent upon the company, right? But large, like maybe 6 or 7 times out of 10, these service meshes are just there because people think they're cool, right? Or they could use a cheaper, more simplified alternative that would give them what they need, right? And there's a huge undertaking and a huge burden on these teams to be able to maintain them. So I'd say service meshes as a suite of tools is the one that gives the most tool tax.
I have not seen anywhere, from my experience now, when we have to have a service mesh, right? They always cool, and you said like KubeCon, they always have pretty good demos of KubeCon with service meshes, right? Because you can inject, you can do mutant TLS and all that fancy stuff, but then the way have to implement and work with them is always complicated.
Could be like me, right? When back in the day when I had 3 service meshes running because none of them were actually working perfectly, and I was just in test mode.
You start a new one, and then see if it works, right?
Exactly.
It's interesting, but that's the total cost of ownership. Like, we have that term as well, right? When we do, especially when we talked about on-prem stuff, we talk like the total cost, because that was also bring up like, well, the server is cheap, right? But it's not the server that's going to be the highest price. It's people's time maintaining the server. It's going to be
exactly
the highest price that you pay.
And this is the problem with the industry, right? We look at the open source, even just the CNCF landscape, right? Because we're talking about Kubernetes here. All of those tools, the large majority of them are free. Right. So the CTO and all of the VPs of engineering and the people that are not the ones maintaining it think, oh, this is great. Yeah, you can install, Prometheus, Grafana, Loki, whatever you want, because they're free. Well, they're not really free. They're just free to install.
Yeah.
They're not free to manage and maintain. And I think that's what the new tool tax really does, right?
Yeah.
It's a framework in which you can actually get the true value of these tools that you're choosing. And then what that enables you to be able to do is make decisions on two fronts, right? What tools do we actually want to keep? And then what's the pattern and framework for making new tool choices in the future?
Yeah. It's also really interesting to add the documentation of the tool, right? Anybody that's worked with Envoy and look at the documentation from Envoy know that, oh shit, this is complicated, right? And if you go to some other tools, I mean, it's not just taking like a proxy, like, oh, take this proxy, like understanding and trying to configure and work with a proxy is also a big task. It takes a lot of time to set up a configuration for Envoy. It's just,
yeah, and also it's written in C. And how many C developers or C programmers do you have in your organization? Probably zero.
Yeah.
But it's a cool tool, and it does 15 to 20 different features that may or may not be useful right now. But it's a way of we need to help the industry with these types of problems, right? We've given them so many tools that they can't make the right decisions, or they don't know when they've made the wrong ones.
Yeah, and that's so good. That's why we have this as well. It's so hard to tell. Sometimes when I meet other people, we will come to it, but like how you build a good platform. Like what are the tasks? Like I'm sitting here having a bad platform. How can I prove to others that we can improve this platform? But we have some points. Like let's go dive to a 30-day sprint. Like chaos to shipping. We have that here. Like you said that a couple of times. Like.
Yeah.
What do you mean with it?
So I choose 30 days as a good amount of time, right? Because I've literally watched 18-month projects die, right? Scope creep, priority shifts, team loses faith, right? But really 30 days is this forcing function. It's repeatable, right? I've done it tons and tons of times. So how does this work? So week 1, we do an audit, right? What's actually running? Right, actually running, not what the team thinks is running, because as we all know, those two things are probably not the same.
Yeah.
So do you remember that company that I was talking to you about that had the 47 tools?
Yeah.
So let me tell you what the people like inside that actually look like, right? So their complexity score was 42 out of 50. So they're in complete and utter crisis mode.
Yeah.
And the VP of engineering, I'll call her Sarah, said, This isn't a technical problem anymore. This is a people problem, right? 2 senior engineers quit the same day, same exit interview. I'm tired of fighting the platform. One of them said, I haven't had dinner with my kids on a weekend for the last 6 months, right? And her best developer had a competing offer, right? So the overall morale score, which is something that I think the industry also needs to do, and we can come onto that in a minute, was about a 3.2 out of 10. So we've done an audit of what we're currently dealing with. Then week 2, we do the categorization, right? So that's the 4 buckets that I was talking about. Yeah. We prioritize those quick wins, right? So I said to the team, for 30 days, you're not building anything. You're only going to be deleting things. Senior engineer says, well, we've invested all this money. And I said, the money's gone. What do you want to keep paying? Like, do you want to keep paying for it?
Yeah.
Right. And here's what really matters, right? Which is the team knew what was wrong. They'd known for months.
Yeah.
But nobody was given the permission to delete anything. And that's not a cultural problem, right? That's not political permission. It's not even a knowledge problem, right? It's just a permissions problem. And I gave them the permission. So then on the 3rd week, we performed the deletion, right? So we got rid of 18 redundant tools were gone. 6 over-engineered tools were simplified. Then week 4, we do the most important thing, right? Which is we systemize. So we document the hell out of what we've just done. We document how we make new tool decisions, why we got rid of old tools. We built 3 dashboards that matter. And we perform and provide governance so complexity doesn't creep back, right? So that's 30 days. And what kind of came out the back of that? So the complexity score went from about 42 to 26.
Yeah.
The monthly cost dropped overall from 150K to 80K. So that's roughly about 840K annually in savings, right? And the deployment went from about 2 weeks to a day, right?
Yeah.
But that sounds really impressive on a sheet of paper, right? But here's what actually matters. The developer came to me at the end of the 4 weeks and said, Steve, I went home at 5 p.m. yesterday. It's like literally the first time in 8 months that I've done that. And my daughter said to me, Daddy, you're home. Right? That's what we're working for.
Yeah.
So that we can have a better quality life with our family and our loved ones. Not to run the latest version or the beta version of a tool so that we can go and impress our friends down the pub. That's not what we're here to do.
And also what comes in our sprints later, like building a platform for developers that they can work with and they love, right? I usually have this, when I set up a platform, like I'm competing with like Nextlify or like Vercel, right? If the platform that I build is not the first choice, right? If it's easier to go something else, I've done something wrong, right? I want the platform that I built to be number one. As a developer, like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the platform Matthias built because that's the best I can get. It deploys quicker. I have all the stuff I need, right? So if you say that you have a platform and it takes 2 weeks to deploy, that platform is not built with the developer's best interest in mind, right? It's built for someone else.
Agreed. Yeah. So I run a diagnostic at every engagement that we start, right? And I ask the platform team, simple question: rate your platform 1 to 5. 1 being terrible, 5 being incredible, right? Then I ask the same question to the developers, and I put the two things side by side.
Yeah.
And the gap is always staggering, right? The platform team says we're a 4, and the development team says we're a 2.
Yeah.
And because when the platform's painful, like you're saying, developers don't complain, right? They just root around the problem. So, like, there was a fintech that I was working at last year. Lead developer, we'll call him James so that he doesn't know who I'm talking about. And he needed a test environment for a Friday demo for a customer.
Yeah.
So, the classic platform process: create your Jira ticket, wait for 2 days. I'll write 3 YAML files. I have to wait for the pipeline.
Yeah.
So guess what happened? James span up a render instance on his own personal credit card.
Yeah.
Right. 12 minutes, deployed, did the demo, got the deal. Nobody knew for 3 months until the finance found the charges. Right.
Yeah.
But everyone would say, oh, that's just irresponsible. Right. But James wasn't being irresponsible. He was being rational.
Yeah.
Right. Because the fastest path to business value went around the platform, not through it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not shadow IT. It's not even a discipline problem. It's a user experience problem, right? And the fix is what I call golden path, right? So it's not this locked down mandate. It's a path of least resistance that allows things to happen, but in the right way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But the problem is, if the golden path is harder than the workaround wins every time.
But I think it's like... Sorry, Paulina, go to first there.
Yeah, I have a question, because you said you compare what platform team thinks about the platform and what the developers think about the platform. I was also part of the assessment when we had a third party to it, and it was business and management side, and they have usually completely different point of view than platform team and then the developers on top of it, because they want to be compliant, blah blah. They also have the different angle, different point of view, which is not always necessarily true. What are your thoughts about it? I'm curious, because since you've done
the business see one thing, right, which is $signs, euros, or pound signs, right? They live in that world. So really, they're looking at cost, right? What is this costing to run the platform, and what's the return on investment for the costs that we're putting forward? So I agree with you, and I think it makes a ton of sense, and I've even done it myself before, right? Which is get the business's perspective. But actually, the platform team's customers are the developers. So really, if the developers are happy and are able to ship features at a good cadence, they love the platform and they love the platform team. The business obviously see the monetary angle. So we have to make sure that the platform is at a sensible cost. But if the ROI is that we can deploy 100 times a week, they will sink the cost. If they say we're deploying 2 times a week, or maybe even 2 times every 2 weeks, they will not sink the cost, and they will start asking questions. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one more thing which I see the business looks into its compliance and security, that all of it can be done. But I also seen cases when, for example, okay, developers and platform allows to ship faster, but the management, it's not there with allowing to ship faster, and you still have blockage on the, development, on deployment on demand to production, or, do it, 100 times. So, for example, the development speed is fast, but the lead time is still very slow because of the lack of the mindset.
Yeah, and that's also when you do an exercise called value stream mapping, right? And you actually map this value out, and you have, two applications that are deploying, and you say how long does it take to make a change and get that all the way to production, and then you have the data to be able to have those types of conversations. But I think your risk and compliance point, Paulina, is right. You also have that angle as well. How secure and compliant is the platform is definitely an angle as well that needs to be thought about and regularly. But I also think that the platform team needs to be made up of not just platform engineers, right? It needs to be made up of people from compliance, from security, from networking. And I think to go back to what we were talking about, right? We can self-service everything, right? We can do GitOps, but if we don't measure developer outcomes, right? We need to measure developer outcomes, not platform features, right? What's the time to the first deploy? What's the time to fix a broken deployment? What's the overall satisfaction? How compliant and how secure are the default ways that the application teams deploy their workloads, right? The other thing that I'm a big fan of is to run platform retrospectives monthly and just let the developers unload.
Yeah.
Right? Because when's the last time your platform team talked to people using the platform? Probably very, very infrequently.
Yeah, I think the feedback is important to being able, it doesn't matter if you're a developer, if you're in management, or if you're in the platform. And I agree, we usually not collect the feedback enough from the developers, or we collect them from a few who are using the platform the most and who are willing to. Because another thing which I've seen, developers, we don't have time, we don't want to do it, we just want to develop code, we don't care about the platform.
Of course.
And you have like 2-3 who are more active and want to actually contribute to something out of their team.
Yeah, and I think that's a cultural problem, right? I think that's empowering people to stand up and speak, right? And it's really how do you perform these retrospectives? How do you make sure that everyone gets their chance to speak? So one of the things that I do when I do retrospectives is I actually go around the room and I get everyone to speak. And I don't want you to say what the previous person said, because that's just the easy answer, right? So I want your real world experience. And then what that allows you to be able to do is to have a backlog of features and functionality that directly correlate and improve your developers' experience. And then what they can see is that, oh, you know what, the guys and girls are actually listening to what we're saying, right? And then you build this environment where you can also say something back to the application teams, which is like, why have you got 65 Helm charts for each of your apps? Why don't you think about consolidating them to 5 and then pass the variables in? And that's less stuff that we have to manage. But yeah, that's a cultural thing, I think.
But don't you need to follow that? When I set up things, I try to ask the developer, like, what are you building? Like, are you building, and like, are you building in blue-green deployments, right? And then from the question from the developer, I can choose what kind of ingress I want to use, right? And then be very clear with, like, okay, you gave me this answer here, I'm going to use this ingress here, but it doesn't mean it's going to be this forever. Right now, we're going to use this one. If you change, like, the developer, what you want to do in the upcoming thing, we are also up to changing after the requirements that the developer has. So I think the developers need to also be part and provide like some of the steering, how you want to have your platform, what the tools you want to have inside it, right?
Yeah, of course. We I call that building business value versus what I call tech hobbies.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
Right. And you've probably heard me talk about this if you've watched the videos on YouTube, right? A CFO asks 7 engineering leaders one question, right? How long to rebuild production if we lost everything tomorrow? And what happened? 5 seconds of silence. They've got 94 years of combined experience and no one could answer, right? That's where engineering careers die instantaneously, right? They've been thinking like engineers and forgot to translate to business value.
Yeah. Another part I want to go back to also is like the golden path, right?
Mhm.
I don't think, sometimes we call it a path, right? But I think it's hard to say that it's a path. It's more like, I would say like I want to call it more like common grounds on how you can walk, right? This is the area, walk freely, but please following this kind of requirements or these steps when you walk. But you're free to do whatever you wherever you like, right? Because sometimes it's like it's not like you have to walk on the path here to get to the top, right? It's like this is the area here. You can go anywhere you like to go to the top, but please don't litter, right? That's what we experience, right?
Yeah, I think I use this analogy with customers of mine, and I'll use it on you too, and hopefully it makes sense, right? I call them golden guardrails. So do you know a bowling alley? When you go to a bowling alley and you're doing 10-pin bowling, and they have the guardrails up for the people that don't know how to bowl properly, and the reason is because they want you to hit the pins.
Yeah,
they don't care how the ball gets the way to the end. They just want you to hit the pins, and it's the same with what we're doing. We need you to be able to deploy to the platform, but we're going to put some guardrails in so you don't do anything a little bit silly. But you can kind of choose your own adventure a little bit within reason. But we have to make sure that we build and we bring business value, which is hitting the pins.
And I try to translate that to security as well. I want to be like the golden like guardrails also have to be like the secure guardrails. It's the same way. If it's the easiest way, it should also be the most secure way, right? So when developer build things and deploy, the easiest way for them should also be the secure way and the compliance way, as I try to work it and help them in that step, right? So they don't have to do anything else. Like if I make it too hard to work with security, they also maybe step side it or do some other walk over the path or like doing other things, like trying to keep the easiest part also the most secure part is what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, and I think the uncomfortable truth is that engineering is a cost center, right? And we exist to support profit centers, right? And the moment that we forget that is the moment we optimize for architectural elegance instead of business outcomes, right? And we lose the room, right? So like you can say, as an example, we deleted a Jenkins server, right? That means nothing to the CFO.
No.
But when you say we deleted 40K's worth of annual costs and cut deployment failures by 60%, that gets his or her attention. Yeah. And I think what we have to do is make sure that when we make technical change, we think about the money that's saved, what's the risk that we introduce, and then finally, what's the human impact on this? Because the unit economics catch I mentioned, right, which was like 2 weeks ago, that's exactly this, right? Engineers saw an architecture, they saw a spreadsheet that said your customers won't pay for this. And it was the same project with two completely different conversations happening, right? The technical one and the commercial one. But the engineers need to own both of them, and sometimes they only own one of them, which is the engineering one or the technical one. And I would say, like an exercise for anybody listening is take your 3 greatest or last technical achievements and write one sentence for each with a pound sign or a euro sign or a dollar sign, depending upon who's listening, a percentage and a time frame. And if you can't, you're speaking engineering, not business.
Okay, we're coming up to 43 minutes here. I think we're gonna close this episode. So Steve, any last words here or wisdom before we press the stop?
Yeah, I'd say one thing, right? Your platform's biggest risk isn't technical, it's political, right? Platforms die when the CFO asks you a question that you can't answer, when your best engineer leaves, or when the team builds for their CV instead of the business. So this week, I would say to all of you, pick one tool you suspect no one's using. Check the logs. If nothing's happened in 30 days, deprecate it. In 60 days, delete it, right? And the simplicity test is free, right? It takes 8 minutes. It's 0 to 50 specific recommendations. Reach out to me, steve@platformfix.com. Follow me on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I'll happily send it to you. Because your platform's power doesn't come from what you add. It comes from what you have the courage to delete.
Yeah. Paulina, any wisdom from you? Words?
No, I think a lot of useful stuff, and a lot of stuff I agree and see on the daily basis. So
Yeah, and that's why it's so hard to have both you here on the show, right? Because we all agree on the things that, right? It's hard to like, we all agree on this, but it's still happening, right? That's what I'm concerned about, right? And that's why it's so good to bring up, like, how can you detect it and what you do about it. But with that, I will end this show. Thanks for tuning in.
thank you.
You have been listened to DevSecOps Talks with Matthias, Andre, and Paulina. For notes and information, please visit devsecops.fm. Thanks for tuning in.